Moonbird was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Short, and that's why I watched it. I'm still working my way through all of those. I'm now just coming towards the 60s. And this one in particular was released in 1959, of course, directed by John Hubley, and to be honest, I don't really like it that much. There are some things about this that I think are really brilliant and very praiseworthy, but there are some aspects of it that I just didn't really engage with. One of the things I loved about it is one of the things that I wasn't that bothered about it, but basically the narrative, it's also quite long, it's 10 minutes, which for a short that I didn't find that engaging to begin with, meant that my attention wandered really quickly. But it's about two young boys who go outside in the middle of the night to try and capture this bird. They've got their little bird cage, they're digging, I don't know why they're digging. It's a very odd sequence, but there were things about it that I liked. But the first thing that needs to be discussed is the style of animation, and maybe that's why that won. Because it has a very unique style of animation that I have personally never seen before. I've seen some of John Hubley's work. I don't believe I've seen him do anything like this before, although he may well have done, of course. But it's hard to describe. I don't have the vocabulary. I'm not an artist in that sense, so I don't necessarily have the vocabulary to describe what it's like. But it's translucent in a way. The characters are almost translucent, which is pretty interesting. I think the movements are quite fluid. It's not, hyper detailed. Some of it's quite basic and blocky, but the movements are fluid, and it's for a brief period, it's really pleasing to watch and quite fascinating. But as the short goes on, I kind of grew tired of it, and I wished it had been less translucent and more detailed. I think it's creative. I think it's well done, but for my personal tastes, visually, it lost its appeal pretty quickly. With regards to the narrative, I think that wore thin as well. I wasn't that bothered about whether or not these young boys would capture the bird. But what I did love is the voice acting and how real it is. The two young boys are voiced by Mark Hubley and Ray Hubley. I'm going to assume that they are some relative of John Hubley, sons, nephews, I don't know. But I'm going to assume that they are relatives, especially as this is written by Hubley and also Faith Hubley, who I will guess is his wife or sister. And the voice acting is the most realistic I've ever seen. I don't know if the boys were given a specific script to follow, or if a lot of it was more improvised, but I feel like their dialogue, their interaction, was the most realistic I've ever seen, or heard, I guess, from anything like this. The speech, the patterns, the intonations, the pacing, the way they interacted with each other, the way one of the boys would kind of talk to himself a bit, so realistic. And it does make me think that maybe the boys were given a bit of free rein with a lot of the dialogue. Maybe they worked around what they were saying rather than the other way on. Particularly true for the youngest. I can't remember if that is Mark or Hampy, which are the characters' names. I can't remember which the youngest boy is, but the youngest boy was phenomenal. They were both great, but he was certainly amazing with his speech patterns, and I thought, genuinely the dialogue in this is spot on. So even though the animation for me wasn't that pleasing, and I wasn't that bothered about the narrative, I really, really had a lot of fun with the actual dialogue, and I was very impressed by it, and something that I thought was worth praising. That's one of the reasons why, even though I don't think the animation or the narrative is Oscar worthy, I think how realistic it is definitely made it Oscar worthy. So Moonbird is definitely worth checking out for that aspect of it. Very impressive. I enjoyed how creative the animation style was. As I said to begin with, it was quite interesting, but as it progressed, I kind of tired of it and wanted something a bit more a little bit less abstract and a bit more detailed, but that's my personal preference. I know some people do kind of like this kind of animation style, and that is perfectly fine. Moonbird is not the best thing I've ever seen, but it does have a lot of strong points to it, and I do think it's worth checking out. I can understand why it won the Oscar.